Hello, we are nearing the end of 2021, and you know what that means. It means that there are going to be lists now of the best books of the year. It is the time of lists. Lots of different newspapers and publications and booksellers all like to put out their best books of the year, and I always enjoy looking at this. I mean, like all readers, I can't resist a geeky list of books just to go through to pick out which books have I read, which books haven't I read, which books have I been looking forward to getting to but haven't got around to yet, which books haven't I even heard of before, and maybe I should have heard about them. So this is making me aware of other books I ought to be getting to. So I'm gonna go through a list today put out by Publishers Weekly. They always get in their list early each year of their best books of the year. They've picked out 10 books, 5 novels and 5 books of nonfiction that they've picked out as the best books of the year. So I'm just going to go through the list through each book at a time, give a short summary of them and whether I've read them or not, what I think about them, if I'm interested in reading them or not. Let me know in the comments below if you have read any of these and would recommend them or not recommend them, because not all of these books I'm totally on board with. I've only read 2.5 of them, so I don't have a big strong opinion about them, but yeah, as it happens, the very first book on the list is a very short novel called Assembly by Natasha Brown. So this is the UK cover, and it's a book from England, so it's it's appropriate that we start with this because I live here in London. And this is a novel which I think is extraordinary, and I really enjoyed. I found really powerful. It's a story of a young black woman that works in finance in London, and what sort of goes along with that and the expectations placed upon her. She goes out to speak to organizations to try to inspire the youth to that finance is a diverse working environment that is inclusive, but then her own experience of that is quite different, and her thoughts and feelings about that. So we get her sort of stream of consciousness thought about that experience, but also how she's in a relationship with a white man from a very privileged background, and she goes away for a weekend with him where there's a big family assembly there to mark an occasion, but also she is going through a big personal crisis in her life, which I think is really making her question the world around her and how she participates in it and what her place is, and so she's questioning all these things, including the novel itself. Halfway through the book, she sort of is questioning the novel itself, and who the main readers are, who has the privilege to be reading, and how that impacts writing itself, but also the how culture is defined, and a lot of these bigger questions. So yeah, it's a really fascinating book, and for such a short novel as it's commented in the Publishers Weekly article, it makes a big impact. Next is another British novel, Second Place by Rachel Cusk. This was longlisted for this year's Booker Prize, and this is about a woman named M who has a fairly privileged conditions. She has a large house on the coast, and she and her husband, mainly her, decide to invite different artists and writers there to live in a small structure that is on the property that they've sort of set up as like a guest accommodation or like a artist's retreat. And so she invites an artist who's just named Eyal there, and they have some quite strained relations over the course of his time staying there, and and there's a big conflict between not just with him, but also a woman that he brings along with him, and with the rest of her family living on this property. And so it's exploring like issues to do with privilege and culture and class and gender. There's a lot in it about gender, and and I just didn't really get along with this novel. I found it quite frustrating. I thought the character of M was really annoying, and I know that the novel is kind of slightly critiquing her as well, but because we're so entrenched in her perspective and her very like selfish outlook on the world, and she's really concerned with her own feelings and her own preoccupations rather than other people's. I just found that really frustrating, and so yeah, I know some people found this like quite comic and but also insightful, but I found it really fell flat for me, and I felt like it was striving for profundity but was missing the mark. Next is a novel also set in London, though the author, Keith Ridgway, he's Irish, but yeah, this is set in London. It's a novel called A Shock, and so this is the UK cover for this book, but this is the US cover. I think this cover is really beautiful, and actually I'm reading this book currently. I'm in the middle of reading it. You can see where my place mark is, and partly because this is currently shortlisted for the Goldsmiths Prize for Fiction, which I made a whole video about this book award, which rewards fiction that pushes the boundaries of what the novel can do and the novel form, and also Assembly by Natasha Brown is also shortlisted for that prize, and I'm really enjoying this book. It's about the lives of a number of different characters that live on the fringes of society in London, in different areas of South London, actually parts of South London that I'm very familiar with, so I'm really connecting to some parts of this book, but there it's very funny and enjoyable how he's exploring the lives of these different characters. There's a real like affection to them, but it's also sort of questioning their ideologies and motives, and the style of writing I expected to be like a bit more distancing at first, but it's really accessible, and it's kind of a book of short stories about these different characters' lives and how their lives loosely connect with each other, but it's forming a much larger picture of this society and this city itself. And I found myself when reading the first section of this book, I was recounting it to my partner and like telling him all about the lives of the experiences of this scene, and this very vivid scene, which is very funny and playful, but also really moving. And a lot of these characters are queer, and it's exploring a lot of that. I wasn't expecting that going into this book, but yeah, I think this is really excellent, so I hope it carries on that way. The War for Gloria by Atticus Lish, and this is a novel I hadn't heard about before reading this list, though I have read the author's previous book, Preparations for the Next Life, which I thought was a really powerful and moving story. And this novel is about a young man who's caring for his mother that's suffering from ALS, which is a progressive nervous system disease. And so yeah, it's about his experiences with her, but also trying to distance himself from his very toxic father. So yeah, that sounds like a powerful story, and I've been wanting to read more of this author's work, but I'm so glad this list has made me aware that this author has a new book. Wayward by Dana Spiotta. This is a novel about a midlife crisis and a white woman that comes from a very nice suburban neighborhood, but when she goes through this midlife crisis, she takes her husband to live in a neglected part of Syracuse, New York, to live there and start a new, different life for herself, and about all the problems and issues she encounters along the way. And I've heard really great things about this author before, and always meant to read her writing. So yeah, I'm hoping to get to reading this novel. Then there are 5 books of nonfiction on the list, starting with a book called All That She Carried by Tiya Miles, and this is subtitled The Journey of Ashley's Sack, a Black Family Keepsake. and it explores, the writer explores the material objects which are packed into this cloth sack which an enslaved mother packed for her 9-year-old girl when she was sold to a new master, and so is sort of imaginatively exploring what these objects mean, and it's sounds like such a harrowing story and situation, but is such a clever way of exploring this past of American slavery through this very personal story. All the Frequent Troubles of Our Days by Rebecca Donner, and this book is subtitled The True Story of the American Woman at the Heart of the German Resistance to Hitler. And so in this book the author explores the story of her great aunt who became involved in the underground resistance movement during World War II until she was captured and executed by the Nazis in 1943. And it feels like there's been a lot of these nonfiction stories that have been surfacing and emerging about really heroic stories of people that were resisting the Nazi movement, and like the Volunteer by Jack Fairweather, which won the Costa Book Awards a couple of years ago, when he explored the story of this Polish officer that sort of infiltrated concentration camps and tried to rouse a resistance movement. And I think it's really moving and powerful how different nonfiction books like this, like Rebecca Donner's book, explore this larger past and history through their own personal stories and familial connections with this past, and are looking into how the personal intersects with the larger history. Dirty Work by Eyal Press. This is subtitled Essential Jobs and the Hidden Toll of Inequality in America, and this is a series of interviews and investigations into people and laborers that perform so-called dirty work, from military drone operators to prison guards to oil rig operators and slaughterhouse laborers, and how a lot of people that work in these different labors come disproportionately from poor and minority backgrounds. And it explores how this workforce is being exploited, and how there is this class system in America, and why this system exists. So it sounds like a very timely book. A Little Devil in America, Notes in Praise of Black Performance by Hanif Abdurraqib. And this is a collection of essays which are looking at the history of Black performance, but also the author's own experiences. The author is a poet and a music critic, and so looking at the history of performances, like large-scale performances like Beyonce's performance at the Super Bowl, but also the history of Black musicians and Black athletes, and exploring the history of this performance and how it's really formed the culture of America today, but also how a lot of these performers aren't given the credit they deserve. And finally, there's a memoir called Somebody's Daughter by Ashley C. Ford, which sounds like such a harrowing and powerful story, where the author is recounting her time growing up while her father was serving a 24-year prison sentence for committing rape. And so, yeah, exploring those feelings and ideas which emerge when someone in our own family has committed a horrific crime, and trying to reconcile with that, and whether you can forgive that individual, and how do you move forward knowing that someone so close to you in your own family has committed such a horrific crime. So yeah, this sounds like a story that I'll really need to be in the right mood to get to, and a sort of psychologically sort of steeled place, you know, to read such a powerful story. But yeah, sounds like such a such an incredible story that yeah, it is a book I'd like to read. But yeah, first I'll finish reading this novel, A Shock, and then yeah, I'm not sure which one I'll get to next. Probably the War for Gloria, because I've read the author's work before, and so I think yeah, this is a book that I'd really like to get to. But yeah, also I think All That She Carried sounds like such a powerful story. But again, yeah, quite a serious and harrowing story. But yeah, one that I'd really like to read as well. But also yeah, I've been really wanting to get to A Little Devil in America, so at least read some of those essays as well. So those are the books I'm most looking forward to from this list, and that I'm hoping to read before the end of the year. But like I said, I'd really like to know from you if you've read any of these books and would recommend them, or if there are any of these books you're really interested in getting to now. Please let me know about those in the comments below. I'll put a link below to this article too, so you can look through these books, and yeah, and there's more comments about them in the article itself. But thank you for watching, and I'm sure there's going to be more lists of the best books of the year coming up that I'll want to have a look through and have a browse through and discuss with you. So I hope you're reading good things, and I will speak to you again soon. Bye-bye.